Here's an unpleasant fact that might hit home for you. More than half of all U.S. adults say they or a family member have experienced one or more forms of gun violence, being threatened with a gun, witnessing a shooting firsthand, being shot, or losing a loved one. That is just one of the many appalling facts laid out in a must-read new book, In Guns We Trust, The Unholy Trinity of White Evangelicals, Politics, and Firearms, written by journalist and author Bill Kole of Rhode Island, former New England bureau chief of the Associated Press, and he joins us now. Bill, congratulations and welcome.
Thank you for having me, John.
So your book opens with the story of your conversion to evangelical Christianity and your discovery that many members of your congregation are packing heat. I was further amazed to learn that gun ownership is 4 times higher among evangelical Christians than among other major faith groups. Why?
It's just bewildering, quite honestly. There's no easy answer to the question why, but this has been going on since the late 60s, when evangelical Christians kind of realize they have some power and some influence.
You're talking about the moral majority era and
the moral
so forth.
majority era, and it coincided also, with desegregation in the United States. White Christians were not too happy to see that, occur. And the rise also of some of these televangelists, Jerry Falwell, and even Billy Graham to some extent, realized, there are 60 million white evangelicals in this country. That's a lot of people who are reliable voters, and they have really kind of rallied around a couple of issues. Of course, we know abortion was central, but with abortion rights being contained in many aspects, they've turned their attention to guns. And there's this fear factor that is driving so much of their desire to own weapons for personal protection and even bring them to church on Sundays.
You note in the book that in some cases, perhaps in many cases, evangelical Christians believe they're going to need their weapon when the end times come, right?
Yes, it's very dark and quite troubling, actually, but people of different faith traditions are surveyed regularly about these kinds of things, and we're asked, how ready do you feel to actually use your weapon and take up arms against the government or against authority in this country if you felt like it was justified? And an overwhelming majority of these white evangelicals, close to 80%, said absolutely, without hesitation. And this is all happening with the rise of Christian nationalism in the United States, which just a few years ago was kind of a fringe ideology. Now it's mainstream.
Well, speaking of mainstream, poll after poll after poll shows solid majorities of Americans support gun control measures like universal background checks, for instance. But you write that, quote, white evangelicals are determined to stand in your way, end quote. How do they do that?
Well, they do that by, again, with their political influence. They can be relied on to elect candidates who share their passion for firearms and the gun culture. And so these are people who have A ratings from the National Rifle Association and will block any attempt to restrict access to guns. And then there's sort of a kind of quasi-theological piece to it, really, where white evangelicals view the Second Amendment as though it were breathed by God. Like it's holy scripture, and it cannot be tampered with in the least. So, we're not talking even yet where we're at a point of trying to amend the amendment, but any sort of restriction on gun access, universal background checks, a ban on those bump stocks that, turn an automatic weapon into a machine gun, these kinds of things are viewed as tampering with something that God has given us.
Author of In Guns We Trust, Bill Kole, is with us. And Bill, you alluded to the bump stocks. This is the device that can attach to a semi-automatic weapon,
yes,
I believe, and turn it into something approaching a machine gun.
Right.
This was the weapon of choice of the Las Vegas massacre shooters, I recall. And after that incident, then President Trump, in his first term, said he wanted to get rid of bump stocks.
Right.
What happened then?
Well, he was quickly disabused of the idea by his advisors. There was a meeting with the NRA and some Republican senators, and the next day he completely dropped that initiative. Something similar happened after the Parkland shooting in Florida, where he, made noises to suggest that maybe it was time to ban assault weapons in this country. And again, his advisors said, Mr. President, you can't do that. Americans will rise up. Yeah. And they probably would, actually, The thing is...
I'm sorry, so evangelical Christians, along with other gun control opponents, have that kind of clout still?
They still have that clout.
Even though the NRA is not what it was.
The NRA is sort of in disarray, but there are other groups that are sort of stepping into the vacuum. There's a group called Gun Owners of America, which is actually a harder line version of the NRA.
Harder line.
Yes, and we're really, you must not tamper with any rights. And just to show you the trend lines here, we had that horrible mass shooting in Uvalde, Texas, in 2022, where so many children were massacred. And since 2022, more laws in state legislatures have been passed to expand access to guns than to restrict access to guns. So we're really not moving in the right direction here.
Well, over the years, I've watched Democrats struggle with the politics of guns. Kamala Harris, last year, revealed at one point that she was a gun owner. She had some line about, if you try to break into my house, you're going to get shot, something along those lines. And she supported many of the most popular restrictions on gun sales, but dropped her support for some of them during the campaign, and we know how the campaign turned out. Where do Democrats and other gun control proponents go wrong when they try to promote their cause?
I think they don't do a very good job of reassuring the public that really no one is out to take their guns away. There is no agenda to disarm Americans.
That is widely believed. Excuse me for interrupting.
No, absolutely. This is the problem. And I think that Democrats are not articulating and framing the issue properly. That, yes, of course we have a Second Amendment. People have a right to own a weapon. If they get the proper permits, if their state requires it, they can conceal it on their person, or they can even openly carry in some states. All of that is allowed. And, the great majority of gun owners are responsible people.
Right.
But, clearly we're in this endless loop, this cycle of gun violence that you just don't see anywhere else in the world. So we've got to, address it somehow. And we have more guns than we have citizens in this country.
We just have about 30 seconds left, Bill, but I did want to bring this full circle by asking you, how has your understanding of the link between gun culture and gun control resistance affected your own evangelical faith?
Oh, John, it feels honestly like evangelicals armed with AR-15 assault rifles have hijacked my faith to the point where it has really rocked my world. A faith that is rooted in nonviolence and pacifism, and the person of Jesus we call the Prince of Peace. I don't even recognize it anymore in the hands of these gun-toting evangelicals.
Bill, thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Good luck with your book. In Guns We Trust. Check it out.